Dawn unfolded quietly over the peaceful suburbs of Alexandria, Virginia, until Lucy's frantic barking shattered the silence. The German shepherd hadn't stopped since first light, her distressed cries reverberating through the neighborhood. She stood guard beside James Wilson Jr.'s coffin, her urgency growing with each moment. "That dog hasn't stopped since they brought him back," murmured Sarah Wilson, her voice unsteady as she observed her son's loyal companion. James Jr., a highly regarded military officer, had reportedly died during a covert mission just a week before. It was Michael Thompson, James's childhood friend and a former detective, who finally persuaded Sarah to open the coffin. What they found turned their world upside down. The polished mahogany casket was empty. In the distance, a black van's engine growled to life, tires screeching as it sped away into the misty morning. Lucy's barking ceased abruptly, replaced by a deep, menacing growl. The Wilson residence, a two-story colonial with a white fence and a carefully maintained garden, sat on a tree-lined street, not far from the Pentagon. For 30 years, the house had sheltered the history of a military family. Since her husband's disappearance in 2004, Sarah, now 54, had tended to the property with meticulous care. A former intelligence analyst, she had set aside her career to raise James Jr., directing her sharp mind towards creating a stable home. The walls were adorned with family photographs, James Sr. in his dress uniform, young James Jr. at his academy graduation, and snapshots of happier days. At 29, James Jr. had followed directly in his father's footsteps, joining the same elite unit. Tall and self-assured, he carried an air of quiet purpose. His closest companion, Lucy, a military-trained German shepherd, had been with him for 5 years, displaying an intelligence that seemed almost human. Michael Thompson lived next door, a former detective who had turned to private investigations. He had witnessed the Wilson family's tragedies unfold, first with James Sr.'s mysterious disappearance, and now with James Jr.'s death. Michael had sworn to protect what was left of the family, a promise that weighed heavily on him now. General Robert Anderson, the commanding officer of James Jr.'s unit, had been a consistent figure in their lives. With silver hair and a face etched by years of service, he had mentored James Jr. and supported Sarah through her darkest times. Yet lately, a shadow in his eyes hinted at secrets too heavy to carry alone. Beneath the calm exterior of manicured lawns and American flags, long-buried secrets began to stir. Lucy's frantic barking marked the start of something that would unravel carefully guarded truths and put the bonds of family and loyalty to the ultimate test. A week earlier, on a crisp autumn morning, Sarah had opened her door to find General Anderson standing there, solemn, with a chaplain at his side. Lucy, usually friendly, had hesitated, her tale still and low. Anderson's voice cracked slightly as he delivered the news of James Jr.'s death during a classified mission, describing it as quick and without suffering. Sarah's world tilted, memories of James Sr.'s disappearance flooding back. Days blurred together. The official story blamed a training accident, but Sarah's instinct screamed otherwise. The night before his last mission, James Jr. had called her. His voice was tense. "Mom, if anything happens, there's something you need to know about Dad," he'd said before the call abruptly dropped. The military moved quickly with the funeral arrangements, refusing Sarah's request to see her son's body, citing severe injuries. General Anderson's reassurances about a closed casket did little to quiet Sarah's doubts. Meanwhile, Lucy's behavior became increasingly erratic. She stopped eating, spending long hours staring at James Jr.'s photograph. Her agitation spiked whenever military officials came by, her growls especially directed at Colonel Richards, James Jr.'s superior. On the morning of the funeral, Sarah found a crumpled note in James Jr.'s uniform. "Trust Lucy. She knows." Michael, too, sensed that something was amiss. The unmarked cars parked nearby, the military's rigid handling of the funeral, and General Anderson's tense demeanor, all were red flags. "Something's not right, Sarah," Michael confided. "I've seen enough cases to know when details don't fit." Lucy's actions took on a clear purpose. She began bringing Sarah items linked to James Jr., his boots, his jacket, and finally, a locked metal box from under the bed. It was as if Lucy was trying to convey a message, not seeking comfort. On the day of the funeral, Lucy's urgency peaked. She positioned herself by the coffin, alert and protective. When Colonel Richards arrived to finalize arrangements, Lucy's stance shifted to that of a guard, eyes fixed and body tense. Her behavior unsettled Richards enough to suggest confining her during the service, but Sarah remembered her son's note. "Trust Lucy." At dawn, Lucy's barking became more intense. No longer the sorrowful howls of a grieving dog, but the sharp, precise barks of a trained military animal alerting to danger. She darted between the coffin and the window, each movement more insistent than the last. "She's never been wrong," Michael murmured, watching Lucy with narrowed eyes. "Trained dogs sense things we can't." With shaking hands, Michael unlatched the coffin. As they lifted the lid, the sight inside stole the breath from their lungs. The coffin was empty. No body, no personal items, just a slip of paper in the corner with a message in James Jr.'s handwriting. History repeats itself. Through the window, Sarah spotted a black van parked across the street, its engine idling. Two men in dark suits emerged, their movements too precise to be anything but military. "Sarah, we need to move," Michael urged, his tone urgent. "Whatever this is, it's not over." Lucy's growl deepened, muscles taut as footsteps approached the front door. Clutching the envelope and the metal box, Sarah followed Michael out the back door, her heart hammering. As they slipped into the shadows, General Anderson's voice echoed through the house, calling her name. Moving swiftly along the back fence, Lucy led the way, her actions those of a dog trained for escape and evasion. The crunch of tires on frost signaled more arrivals. Michael directed them toward his garage, whispering urgently about an emergency bag James Jr. had asked him to keep ready. Sarah's grip tightened on the envelope and the box, her mind racing. Both her husband and son had vanished under eerily similar circumstances, 20 years apart. This was no coincidence. The military's orchestrations, the surveillance, Lucy's training, it all pointed to a truth buried beneath layers of deception. "This started with James Sr., Sarah breathed, her voice steadied by determination. "And our son found out." Lucy's ears flicked at the sound of car doors slamming shut. Their time was running out, and the path ahead was full of danger. But the need to uncover the truth was stronger than the fear gripping Sarah's heart. "They can't have gone far," Anderson commanded, his voice cutting through the morning air. "And remember, Mrs. Wilson is not to be harmed. She's as much a victim as anyone." Colonel Richards emerged from the house, holding Lucy's chew toy. "Sir, the dog's trail is fresh. They left just minutes ago," he reported, examining the toy closely. "There's something else. The metal box is missing." Anderson's expression darkened. "That complicates things. If she has the box..." Pulling out a phone, he spoke in hushed tones. "Eagle's Nest is compromised. 20 years of work is at risk. Yes, sir." From their hiding spot, Sarah tightened her grip on the metal box. Beside her, Michael touched her arm gently, motioning towards his car. The driveway was exposed, and they needed to move quickly. Lucy pressed against Sarah's leg, her training evident in her silent vigilance. "Whatever's in that box, an envelope. James Jr. risked everything to get it to you," Michael whispered. "We need to honor that trust." Outside, a new voice made Sarah's blood run cold. Assistant Director Wesley Parker of Military Intelligence, the same man who had handled James Sr.'s case 2 decades ago. Time had not been kind to him, but his commanding presence was unmistakable. "Anderson," Parker called out, "this is no longer your operation. My team takes over from here." Scanning the area with a cold efficiency, he added, "Mrs. Wilson must be found before she opens that box. 20 years of secrets cannot unravel now. Sarah's hands trembled as she held the mysterious box. The same man, the same situation, 20 years later. James Jr.'s last words over the phone echoed, "There's something you need to know about Dad's disappearance." The pieces were beginning to fit together, forming a picture she wasn't sure she wanted to see. Michael's garage had a back door leading to an alley, their only way out. Lucy, sensing the urgency, positioned herself to lead the way, her military training revealing itself with every movement. "On my signal," Michael breathed, watching the search patterns of the men outside. When they round the corner, a set of keys appeared in his hand, bearing a familiar logo. "James Jr.'s private storage facility," he explained. Sarah nodded, realization dawning. Her son hadn't just foreseen this moment, he had planned for it. A roundabout route avoided any followers, Lucy remaining alert the entire way. The storage unit, labeled 247, matched the number engraved on the metal box. When the door rolled up, Sarah gasped. Inside lay a meticulous command center, walls plastered with photos, documents, and maps, all connected by red strings. At the center hung a large photograph of James Sr., surrounded by newspaper clippings about his disappearance. "He was investigating," Sarah whispered, approaching the evidence wall. All this time, James Jr. was piecing it together. Michael scanned the documents. "These go back decades. Operation Eclipse, multiple agents vanished, all ruled accidents or training mishaps." A finger pointed to a familiar face. "Look, Assistant Director Parker is tied to most of these cases." Hands trembling, Sarah opened the metal box. Inside lay a single DVD and a letter dated 1 week before James Jr.'s death. "Mom, if you're reading this, they've made me disappear, just like Dad. But I'm not dead, neither is he." The letter revealed a conspiracy spanning 2 decades, a network of corrupt officials within the military, selling classified intelligence. James Sr. had uncovered it, but the threat was too great. Faking his death was the only way to survive. "And keep investigating." The DVD has everything. Evidence, locations, names. Most importantly, it has Dad's location. Sarah sank to her knees, tears streaming down her face. Lucy nuzzled her hand, whining softly. 20 years of grief transformed into hope. "They're both alive," she breathed. "Both my boys are alive." A sharp knock at the storage unit's door broke the moment. Lucy's ears perked up, but instead of growling, her tail wagged slightly. "Mrs. Wilson," came a familiar voice. "I'm alone." "It's time you knew the whole truth." General Anderson stepped inside, closing the door carefully behind him. "I've been protecting your family for 20 years, he began, pulling out an old photograph of himself with James Sr. The picture told a story of betrayal, with Parker lurking in the background, his expression dark. Parker headed a shadow unit. "Within military intelligence," Anderson explained. "They eliminated anyone who got too close. Your husband was too high profile to disappear quietly, so they faked his death." Anderson handed Sarah a key to another storage unit. "Unit 4001, he said. "Everything James Sr. found is there." Michael checked his weapon. "Looks like we're going to Unit 4001, he said, but Sarah's mind was racing. "No," she decided. "We need to understand why they moved against James Jr. now. Something's changed, something big enough to risk exposing everything." As they sped through the night, Sarah's composure cracked. 20 years, she cried. "I raised our son alone, visited an empty grave. They could have told me." Michael's voice was steady. "They did it to protect you." "Protect me?" Sarah scoffed. "I'm an intelligence analyst. I could have helped." In the silence that followed, Michael handed her a notebook, James Jr.'s journal. His notes revealed a relentless quest for the truth, driven by one goal: to reunite their family. Everything they did was to bring him home. Michael said softly. With fresh resolve, Sarah gripped the key to Unit 4001. Then let's finish what they started. The storage unit was dusty and neglected, a stark contrast to the organized command center. Hidden beneath mementos, a sealed metal container and a letter from James Sr., dated just days after his disappearance, came into view. The letter explained everything: the shadow network within the military, the decision to fake his death, the risk to their family. "I love you more than life itself," it read. That's why leaving was the only choice. Inside the metal container was a USB drive, its design recent, not 20 years old. James Jr. had been there, adding to his father's evidence. Files on the drive revealed Parker's group's plan. Something big, scheduled for next week. Before Michael could respond, a familiar voice called softly from the doorway. "Hello, Sarah. It's been a long time." Heart pounding, Sarah turned. There, framed in the light, stood James Wilson Sr., older, but unmistakably alive. "I'm sorry," he said, voice rough with emotion. "I'm so sorry for everything." Overwhelmed by a surge of emotions, grief, anger, love, Sarah took a step forward. Her hand rose slowly to touch his face, confirming what her heart already knew. He was real. He was alive. Then, without warning, she slapped him, hard. The sound cracked through the storage unit. 20 years, she choked out. 20 years of nightmares, of watching our son grow up alone, of visiting an empty grave. I deserved better. James's eyes were filled with regret. "I deserve that," he admitted. Quietly. "I deserve much worse." "Where's our son?" Sarah demanded. "Where's James Jr.? "Safe," James replied. "Hidden. But we don't have much time." And as the dust hung in the air, the three of them, husband, wife, and their loyal protector, Lucy, prepared to confront the danger that had shadowed their lives for 2 decades. Michael reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "No," she said firmly. "No more cryptic answers. No more secrets. You don't get to walk back into my life and start giving orders. I want the truth, all of it, right now." Michael moved to guard the door, providing them privacy while staying. Alert. James Sr. sank onto an old trunk, the weight of his years suddenly apparent. "Parker's group," he began. "They call themselves the Foundation. They're planning something for next week. Coordinated attacks on several military installations, disguised as a foreign terrorist plot." "Why?" Sarah demanded. "Military contracts, defense spending," he explained. "They're orchestrating a crisis to profit from the response. But it's more than just money. They're aiming for control. The chaos would allow them to place their people in key positions, expanding their influence." Sarah's mind raced, piecing together the clues. "And James Jr.? He got too close, didn't he? Found evidence linking them to arms deals and staged conflicts." James Sr. nodded, pain evident in his eyes. Once Parker realized who he was, they knew they had to act. But James Jr. was prepared. "We planned for this." "The empty coffin, the dog, the storage units," Sarah murmured. Realization dawning. "You two planned everything." "Every detail," James Sr. confirmed. "We needed them to believe they'd won, that they'd made him disappear, just like they did to me. It was the only way to buy time." "Time for what?" Sarah pressed. "To complete the evidence chain," he replied. "To expose not just individual crimes, but the entire conspiracy. James Jr. is finishing what I started, documenting every player, every operation." Sarah's anger flared. "And you thought I couldn't help? That I was better off believing you were both dead?" "You were an intelligence analyst, Sarah. One of the best," he said softly. "They watch analysts most closely, looking for patterns, for anyone piecing things together. Your genuine grief was your protection. That wasn't your choice to make," she snapped. "Not for me, and not for our son." James Sr. sighed. "I know. I've had 20 years to regret that decision, to watch you suffer, to see our son grow up without Me. Every day I wanted to come home. Every day I told myself, just one more piece of evidence, one more connection. Tears glistened in his eyes. I told myself I was protecting you. But maybe I was just a coward, too afraid to face what my choices had done to our family. Lucy, who had been watching intently, moved to sit between them, her gaze shifting, as if trying to bridge the gap of 2 decades. James Jr. Sarah's voice softened slightly. Did he find you, or did you find him? He found me 3 years ago, James Sr. admitted. I'd been keeping track of his career, proud but terrified. He'd follow my path. Then one day, he just walked into my hideout and said, "Hi, Dad, we need to talk." Despite everything, Sarah felt a faint smile tug at her lips. That sounded exactly like their son. Before they could continue, Michael cleared his throat. We need to move. Security patrols will be here in 10 minutes. Sarah turned to her husband, the man she'd loved, lost, grieved, and now found again. What happens now? Now, James Sr. said, standing. We finish this, together. No more secrets. No more hiding. James Jr. is gathering the final proof we need, but he can't do it alone. Will you help us, Sarah? Not because I'm asking, but because it's the right thing to do. Sarah thought of the empty coffin, her son's careful planning, the Foundation's plot, and the lives at stake. She took a breath. I'll help, she said finally. But not for you. For our son. For the truth. The briefing room at General Anderson's residence was tense. As the plan unfolded, a knock at the door made everyone freeze. Colonel Richards entered, his face grim. Before Michael could respond, a familiar voice called softly from the doorway. Hello, Sarah. It's been a long time. Heart pounding, Sarah turned. There, framed in the light, stood James Wilson Sr., older, but unmistakably alive. I'm sorry, he said, voice rough with emotion. I'm so sorry for everything. Overwhelmed by a surge of emotions, grief, anger, love, Sarah took a step forward. Her hand rose slowly to touch his face, confirming what her heart already knew. He was real. He was alive. Then, without warning, she slapped him, hard. The sound cracked through the storage unit. 20 years, she choked out. 20 years of nightmares, of watching our son grow up alone, of visiting an empty grave. I deserved better. James's eyes were filled with regret. I deserve that, he admitted, quietly. I deserve much worse. Where's our son? Sarah demanded. Where's James Jr.? Safe, James replied. Hidden, but we don't have much time. And as the dust hung in the air, the 3 of them, husband, wife, and their loyal protector, Lucy, prepared to confront the danger that had shadowed their lives for 2 decades. Michael reached for her hand, but she pulled away. No, she said firmly. No more cryptic answers. No more secrets. You don't get to walk back into my life and start giving orders. I want the truth. All of it. Right now. Michael moved to guard the door, providing them privacy while staying alert. James Sr. sank onto an old trunk, the weight of his years suddenly apparent. Parker's group, he began. They call themselves the Foundation. They're planning something for next week. Coordinated attacks on several military installations, disguised as a foreign terrorist plot. Why? Sarah demanded. Military contracts, defense spending, he explained. They're orchestrating a crisis to profit from the response. But it's more than just money. They're aiming for control. The chaos would allow them to place their people in key positions, expanding their influence. Sarah's mind raced, piecing together the clues. And James Jr.? He got too close, didn't he? Found evidence linking them to arms deals and staged conflicts. James Sr. nodded, pain evident in his eyes. Once Parker realized who he was, they knew they had to act. But James Jr. was prepared. We planned for this. The empty coffin, the dog, the storage units, Sarah murmured. Realization dawning. You two planned everything. Every detail, James Sr. confirmed. We needed them to believe they'd won, that they'd made him disappear, just like they did to me. It was the only way to buy time. Time for what? Sarah pressed. To complete the evidence chain, he replied. To expose not just individual crimes, but the entire conspiracy. James Jr. is finishing what I started, documenting every player, every operation. Sarah's anger flared. And you thought I couldn't help? That I was better off believing you were both dead? You were an intelligence analyst, Sarah. One of the best, he said softly. They watch analysts most closely, looking for patterns, for anyone piecing things together. Your genuine grief was your protection. That wasn't your choice to make, she snapped. Not for me, and not for our son. James Sr. sighed. I know. I've had 20 years to regret that decision, to watch you suffer, to see our son grow up without me. Every day I wanted to come home. Every day I told myself, just one more piece of evidence, one more connection. Tears glistened in his eyes. I told myself I was protecting you. But maybe I was just a coward, too afraid to face what my choices had done to our family. Lucy, who had been watching intently, moved to sit between them, her gaze shifting, as if trying to bridge the gap of 2 decades. James Jr., Sarah's voice softened slightly. Did he find you? Or did you find him? He found me 3 years ago, James Sr. admitted. I'd been keeping track of his career, proud but terrified. He'd follow my path. Then one day he just walked into my hideout and said, Hi, Dad, we need to talk. Despite everything, Sarah felt a faint smile tug at her lips. That sounded exactly like their son. Before they could continue, Michael cleared his throat. We need to move. Security patrols will be here in 10 minutes. Sarah turned to her husband, the man she'd loved, lost, grieved, and now found again. What happens now? Now, James Sr. said, standing, we finish this. Together. No more secrets. No more hiding. James Jr. is gathering the final proof we need, but he can't do it alone. Will you help us, Sarah? Not because I'm asking, but because it's the right thing to do. Sarah thought of the empty coffin, her son's careful planning, the Foundation's plot, and the lives at stake. She took a breath. I'll help. She said finally, but not for you, for our son, for the truth. The briefing room at General Anderson's residence was tense. As the plan unfolded, a knock at the door made everyone freeze. Colonel Richards entered, his face grim. 40 minutes into the operation, Sarah's world collapsed again. The tracking signals from James Sr. and Jr. suddenly went dark. Last known location? She demanded, fingers flying over the keyboard. The old warehouse district, Michael replied, pointing to the map near the airfield. Sarah stared at the blinking cursor where her family had vanished, her mind racing through possibilities. The comms had gone silent moments before the trackers failed. Elizabeth knew, she realized. She knew they'd come after her. It's a trap. Anderson reached for his phone, ready to send in tactical teams, but Sarah held up her hand. Wait. Sarah, they could be, Michael began. They're alive, she said firmly. Elizabeth needs them alive. Those agent names are encrypted. She needs James Sr.'s decryption key, and James Jr. as leverage to make his father cooperate. Her voice was steel. She stood, gathering her coat. Anderson stepped forward. Sarah, you can't go out there. It's too dangerous. I'm not going to make the same mistake they did, she replied. I'm not going to try to protect everyone by working alone. She turned to Michael. I need your help, both of you. What's your plan? Sarah pulled out an old photograph from her purse. Her and Elizabeth 20 years ago at a military wives' lunch. Elizabeth didn't just betray my husband. She betrayed me too. We were friends. She watched me grieve, watched me raise James Jr. alone, all while knowing the truth. Her hands clenched around the photo. She thinks she knows all our weaknesses, but she's forgotten something crucial. What's that? Michael asked. That I was an intelligence analyst before I was a wife or mother. And I've had 20 years to think about what I would do differently if I ever got another chance to protect my family. Inside the dimly lit warehouse, Elizabeth Morrison faced her captives with cold satisfaction. James Sr. and Jr. were bound to chairs, while Lucy lay unconscious nearby, tranquilized. "You know what I want," Elizabeth said, holding up a flash. "I've sent the decryption key, James, or your son pays the price for your stubbornness." James Sr. strained against his bonds. "Those agents have families, Elizabeth. Children. Just like you did," she corrected sharply, "before Parker's operation got my husband killed." A noise from outside made her pause. Footsteps, a door opening. "That's close enough," Elizabeth called out, drawing her weapon. "Show yourself." Sarah Wilson stepped into the light, hands raised. "Sarah." Elizabeth's surprise was genuine. "How did you find—" "I remembered something," Sarah said, her voice steady. 20 years ago at Emily's birthday party, you mentioned this place, said your father used to own it." "Stay back," Elizabeth warned, but her hand trembled slightly. "You held my hand at James's funeral. You helped me pick out James Jr.'s college applications." "I had to maintain my cover," Elizabeth said, but doubt crept into her voice. "No," Sarah replied. "You were my friend. That part wasn't a lie, was it?" For a moment, the warehouse hung in perfect silence. Then Lucy, who had been playing unconscious, suddenly lunged, knocking Elizabeth off balance. In the same instant, Michael and Anderson burst in. The flash drive clattered to the floor as Elizabeth's gun went flying. Sarah moved swiftly, helping Michael secure Elizabeth while Anderson freed James Sr. and Jr. "How did you know I was faking?" James Jr. asked, hugging Lucy tightly. "Because," Sarah smiled, "she was my friend, and I taught her everything she knew about tranquilizers." As agents led Elizabeth away, the Wilson family gathered in a tight circle, Lucy prancing joyfully around them. "I believe," Sarah said, checking her watch, "you two promised me dinner." James Sr. pulled her close, kissing her forehead. "1 hour," he said softly, "just like we promised. When the truth finally came to light, you would understand why I had to disappear," James Sr. said, his voice heavy with the weight of years lost. "But I never imagined you would join the fight." "What choice did I have?" James Jr. responded with a faint smile. "You always taught me that some things are worth sacrificing everything for." Sarah's fingers lingered on a photograph of James Sr., taken the day their son graduated from the academy. Her eyes softened. "All those years you were protecting us both." "I tried," James Sr. admitted, his voice low. "But in the end, you were both stronger than anything I could do to shield you." He turned to his son, pride evident. "You became a better agent than I ever was." His gaze shifted to Sarah. "And you never stopped being the brilliant analyst who first caught my attention." James Jr. gathered the files, a glimmer of determination in his eyes. "An agent who vanished, the son who found him, and the analyst who brought them back together. We make quite a team." "Don't forget Lucy," Sarah added, smiling as the dog's tail thumped against the floor. "She played her part perfectly," James Sr. chuckled, pulling a small, worn notebook from his jacket. "There's one last thing you need to see. This contains every Operation Parker's network planned for the next 5 years." Sarah's eyes widened as she took the notebook, her analytical mind already racing. "With this, we can dismantle their plans before they even start. More than that," James Jr. added, his jaw set, "we can ensure no other family has to suffer like we did." As they pored over the notebook, Lucy nestled between them, her mission to keep the family together finally complete. Later that evening, while making coffee in the kitchen, Sarah stumbled upon an envelope hidden inside James Jr.'s old baseball cap. Inside was a photograph she'd never seen, dated just 6 months after James Sr.'s supposed death. Her heart pounded as she walked back into the living room, where the two men were still deep in conversation. "What's this?" she asked quietly, showing them the photo. James Sr. and Jr. exchanged glances. The image showed an 8-year-old James Jr. sitting on a park bench, talking to someone just out of frame. The date revealed who it had to be. "You met?" Sarah's voice trembled. James Jr. exhaled slowly. "Once a year on my birthday. I'm so sorry we kept it from you, Mom." James Sr.'s eyes were filled with regret. "I couldn't stay away, not completely. He recognized me that first time, and I couldn't bear to turn him away." Tears glimmered in Sarah's eyes, but instead of anger, she felt an unexpected sense of peace. "So all those years, we were never really broken," she whispered. "We survived, in secret meetings, in hidden moments, in a little boy who understood more than he should have had to." James Sr. stepped closer. "I taught him to stay hidden, to protect you both. I never imagined he'd use those lessons to protect me, too." "Like father, like son," Sarah replied, a tearful smile breaking through. A month later, the Wilson family gathered around their dining table for Sunday dinner, a tradition reborn. The scent of Sarah's lasagna filled the air, mingling with warm laughter and soft music. "Remember the first time you tried to make this, Mom?" James Jr. teased. "I think we ordered pizza 3 times that week." Sarah chuckled, the memory no longer painful. "I was determined to master it. Your father always said it was his favorite." "And it still is," James Sr. replied softly, reaching for her hand. The past month had been a journey of healing. Morning coffees, evening walks, and family movie nights filled the gaps left by 20 years of separation. "I've been thinking," Sarah said, setting down her glass, "about all those missed birthdays and anniversaries. We should celebrate them, all of them. One every weekend until we're caught up." James Jr. grinned. "That's about a year's worth of parties." "Exactly," Sarah laughed. "Starting with your 10th birthday. The first one you shared with your father in secret. I want to hear every detail." James Sr.'s grip on her hand tightened. "I'd like that. To finally share those moments with you." On the day of Parker's sentencing, the Wilson family sat together in the courtroom, Lucy at their feet with her therapy dog credentials, allowing her presence. Parker and Elizabeth stood before the judge, their once powerful facades diminished. Sarah was the first to speak. 20 years ago, these people tore my family apart. They watched me grieve, pretended to comfort me, all while hiding the truth." She turned to Elizabeth, her voice steady. "But they didn't break us." James Jr. followed. "You didn't just steal our past. You tried to rob us of our future. But we're here, together." Finally, James Sr. faced the court. "I spent 2 decades gathering evidence, not for revenge, but for justice. Not just for my family, but for every life they shattered." The judge's sentence was swift. Life imprisonment without parole. As Parker and Elizabeth were led away, the Wilsons held each other tightly, relief washing over them. 1 year later, their backyard was strung with lights for a very special celebration, their vow renewal. Sarah stood hand in hand with James Sr., her voice unwavering. 21 years ago, I thought I'd lost you forever. Today, we're not just renewing our vows. We're making new ones. No more secrets. No more separate battles." James Sr.'s eyes glistened. "And I vow never to leave again. To build new memories to replace the ones we lost." James Jr. stepped forward, a grin playing at his lips. "And I promise to always be the bridge between us, the reminder of why our family fought so hard to reunite." Even Lucy barked happily, earning a round of laughter. As the evening wore on, The Wilson family danced under the stars, their laughter echoing in the warm summer night. Their story, a tale of sacrifice, resilience, and unbreakable bonds, served as a reminder that love doesn't shatter. It bends, it endures, and in the end, it finds a way back home. I hope you enjoyed this version of the story. If you did, please subscribe for more heartwarming tales. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. See you in the next video.